And welcome back, guys, to another lesson with your favorite math teacher, me, Mr. Biza. We're on lesson number 4 for 7th grade math. So let's go ahead and look at what we have going on today. So let's start with our norms. So when you are in the classroom, your mics are muted, your cameras are on. If you have a question, we're going to put it in the chat so that we don't stop the learning for me, Mr. Biza, or for your friends in the classroom. And then make sure you guys are participating so that we can have some fun in this learning in our math class. Next slide. 2. The way I like to open up is our mood meter. So go ahead and tell me what color of the mood meter are you today and why are you feeling that way today? So we've done this a couple of times. You're looking up there, you're picking the color that makes you, but that represents how you're feeling today. So as usual, I'm feeling super awake today. I'm super energized. So I'm in the yellow. Maybe I'm in the blue. Let me just calm down. Breathe, Mr. Biza, breathe. Okay. No. I'm in the yellow. So I'm gonna type in for me. I'm in the yellow because I'm feeling happy and energetic. You can put which color matches your feelings today. Okay, so you just click on the mood meter up here in the top corner. It opens it up so you can see all the different feelings and choose the color that best represents how you're feeling today. I chose yellow because I'm super happy and energetic. All right, so you would click the little blue submit button that's down here in the corner. I'm in my teacher mode, so I don't get to submit my answers. Teardrop. Let's click on the next slide in 3, 2, 1. If I'm going too fast for you guys, you can always put pause in between the slides. I give you that little countdown before I click it so that you can hit the pause button. On this next slide now is your attendance, first name, last name, your student ID, what period I have you in. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. Oh wait, there is no ninth. And then the last one is you're making this up before or after the class. So you're gonna click on this button right here. Unless you've already done it live with me, you're gonna click that one down here. So then you're gonna go ahead and click submit. And then let's go to the next slide in 3, 2, 1. Click. This is where our lesson starts. So we start recording to make sure we're teaching you the best that we can teach you. Click. Operations with rational numbers. So we're still working on our multiplying, dividing, adding, and subtracting. But now we're looking at rational numbers. Remember what rational numbers are? Maybe they're in your notes. Think about it. Fractions, decimals, ring a bell? It should. We just talked about it a couple of days. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Now we're talking about the materials. So you're going to need those notebooks again. Don't lose these notebooks. Hopefully you guys are putting them all in one place. For me, I like to put all my notes into a binder, keep them all together. Even if I have them in a notebook, I keep it in that binder to keep those notes safe and all tied up together. Then you're going to need some type of writing utensil. I prefer you guys use a pencil so that when we're actually doing some work, you can erase any mistakes you make. And you have a Chromebook or a computer, because you're watching this, you have to have something to watch it on. I want you guys to use a Chromebook or a computer so that you can be typing more easily and able to see the screen nice and big. All right, so if you're watching it on a phone or on a tablet, it doesn't have the same effect as working on our notebooks or working on our computers. So let's go ahead and move on to our next slide in 3, 2, 1. Our learning objective today, again, there we go. We're going to be able to add and subtract, multiply and divide, but now we're looking at decimals. We're going to do that fluently with some decimals because our TEKS for today is add, subtract, multiply, and divide, rational numbers, and decimals and fractions are going to be rational numbers. In 3, 2, 1, the next slide is a decimal song. So this guy is going to rap it out, tell you all the rules and how to set up those decimals. So let's go ahead and watch this video, and I'm going to go ahead and be quiet. All right, so you should have watched that video. So let's go ahead and click on to the next slide in 3, 2, 1. Oh, look at those notes. Looks so familiar. But this time we're talking about adding and subtracting with our fractions. All right, guys? So on this lesson right here, we're going to be writing down the notes, but we're looking at the fractions of using 1/2 as our example. Okay, guys? So this one's going to be a little bit different because we're going to be looking at different kinds of multiples. Different kinds of fractions. We're not going to be just straight following one fraction. So we're going to have several little columns. So follow my examples and we should be able to get all those notes down on one page. All right, so let's go ahead and switch over to my document camera so I can show you what I'm expecting or what it needs to look like. All right, here we go. Okay, so here is my notebook. I'm covering all those notes because we're going to go part by part before we go ahead and move on. So the first thing I want to do whenever I'm working with fractions and decimals, well, I'm still learning about fractions. So let's be honest here. Mr. Biza thinks fractions are so cool and he likes fractions more than decimals. But when I was learning about how to do math, fractions were a concept I really had to learn about. So we're going to turn all our fractions into decimals because I know we know how to count some money. You guys know how to count those dollar bills, y'all. So we're going to go ahead and change all those fractions into decimals so that we can do the math. All right. So my first step before I do anything is whenever I see a fraction, I'm going to change it to a decimal. Okay. So that means now, after I've changed everything to a decimal, I can do some adding and subtracting. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. All right, so my first step whenever I'm doing adding or subtracting and I'm working with my decimals is I want to rewrite those problems vertically. So I want to put one number on the top and another number at the bottom so that I can add or subtract going straight up and down. You know, the standard algorithm setup that we do. And then the second step is as I'm writing those down is I want to be very careful and I want to line up those decimals. So I want those decimals to line up perfectly, one on top of the other, so that I'm not adding and subtracting the place values incorrectly. Okay, so they're like, okay, I'm going to follow those rules. Yeah, we need to look at some examples, right? So let's go ahead and go over to this other side over here. All right, so I'm going to look at this first problem. Let me go ahead and cover this up. Ooh, there we go. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. Don't get ahead of yourself, guys. Don't get ahead of yourself. All right, so on this first part, we have 4 minus 2 and 1/2. I'm thinking about that. What was the first thing I have to do before I even do my math? Yeah, that's right. We're going to change that fraction into a decimal. So I'm going to do 4 minus 2 and 1/2. But I got to think about half. How do I do half as a decimal? If I have half a dollar, you know, how much change am I going to have? How many cents? Got to think about it. If I have half of a dollar, how many cents is that? 50 cents. So I'm going to rewrite this problem. I'm going to say 4 minus 2. And then my 50 cents is 0.5 or 0.50. I don't need to have that extra 0 because that 0.5 is just enough for me. So now I can go ahead and rewrite my problem as 4 minus 2.5. Now that I have a decimal, I can follow these rules. I'm going to rewrite my problem vertically. So my one number on the top, my second number on the bottom, and then I'm going to line up the decimals. So on this problem right here, I need to be very careful because there is no decimal over here for the 4. So this is just a whole number. So I have to recognize if there is no decimal, it means that my decimal is at the very end of the number. So that's really just a 4 point. Right there's my decimal. My pen's having a little trouble writing. There we go. So my decimal will be right after that 4. So that still tells me that this is a 4. I'm just paying attention to where that decimal is. So when I line this up, I have it in the right spot. So now we're going to set it up. So 4 minus 2.5. So I'm going to have 4 and I'm going to subtract the 2.5. But there's nothing on top of my 5. So I'm going to add a 0. So now I can go ahead and do my subtraction. Oh, I gave you the answer too soon. So 0 minus 5. If I have nothing, I can't take 5 away from it. So I'm going to go ahead and regroup. So I'm going to borrow one of these from the 4. So my 4 becomes a 3. I lend this 1 over here to the 0. So now this becomes a 10. So I'm going to do 10 minus 5. So I got 10. Let me see, 10, and I take away 5. So I'm left with just 5. All right. And now I can do the ones place. See, because it's after the decimal. That's the ones place. 3 minus 2 is just 1. So my answer in this case would be 1.5. So I'm able to get my number and subtract a fraction from it by changing it to a decimal. So we got to be careful when we're subtracting. Make sure we line up those decimals so that we're able to get our answer. Now let's go ahead and look at a problem if I'm adding. Okay, because this rule's for adding and subtracting. So let's see if I can cover it up real nice and neat and not give away too much of my answers. All right. So that one we have 3 and 1/2 plus 1/2. Ooh, so this time I got 2 decimals. Well, we already said what half is, right? Half of $1 is 50 cents, so 0.5. So I know what these halves are going to turn to. So that's 3, and then my 0.5 is a half, plus my 0.5 because of this other half. So I have my new problem, 3.5 plus 1.5. Yes. All right. Now my rules are write them vertically and line up those decimals. So I got my decimal right there. I got my decimal right there. Okay, so they both have a decimal. I don't have to worry about where they go because I already have decimals for them. So we have the 3.5 and then we have a 0.5. So if I'm adding them together, 5 plus 5 is 10. So I got to have a little extra 1 up here. And then 1 and then 3 more makes 4. So my answer is just going to be 4.0. There you go. Man, see how the decimals line up perfectly? Just the same way over here, they lined up perfectly. So that's what we want. We want all our decimals to line up perfectly to help us get our answer. But that's just one rule, adding and subtracting. We could spend a whole lesson working on just that. But we want to write down all these rules before we start working on them because we want to have our brains get real big. Big brain. All right, so now our next one is multiplying. To me, this is the easiest rules to follow. So my first step again is always change my fractions to decimals so that I can do these problems. It's a little bit harder when I'm multiplying fractions. It's a little bit harder when I'm adding and subtracting fractions. That's why we're changing them to decimals. So first, I'll change my fractions into decimals. Then I'll follow my rules. I'm going to multiply like there are no decimals. So I'm going to look at those two numbers and I'm just going to multiply them. I don't want to pay attention yet. I'm going to have those decimals there, but I don't want to go ahead and have those change how I'm multiplying. I'm just going to multiply them like normal. Like there are no decimals. I'm going to pretend like they're not there while I'm multiplying. Then my second step is, then I'll go back and look at them, and I'm going to have my product, which is my answer I get when I multiply. It's going to have the same number of decimal places as the multiplicand and the multiplier. So those two numbers that I'm multiplying, I'm going to count how many decimal places they have and have that same number in my product. All right, so a lot of big words, a lot of vocabulary that we kind of have to remember. So the two numbers that we're multiplying, I'm going to count those decimals up. And that's how many decimal places I'm going to have in my answer. So let's go ahead and look at an example that I wrote. Going to slide it down. Don't want to give away too much information. There we go. So this is 12 times 1 and 1/2. Remember what we said that 1/2 is? It's 0.5. So then I can rewrite 12 times 1.5. Now, when I multiply, I do like to put them vertically to help me multiply. That's the same way I've been doing it since I was little. So I'm going to keep on doing it my way. I'm going to do 12, and then I'm going to put times 1.5. So I'm going to make sure those decimals are there. So my 1.5 is here. The 12 didn't have a decimal, but I remember, like it was up here, that my decimal is at the very end when I have just a number all by itself. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and multiply. I'm not going to worry. Once I have my decimals down, I'm not going to worry about them until I get my answer. So let's do 5 times 2. That's going to be 10. And then 5 times 1 is just 5. So my first sum is going to be 60 because I have to carry that 1 down. Makes it 60. Then I go over to my tens place. So I'm going to have a placeholder. So I put my 0, I color in, let me know that's my placeholder. Since I'm in the tens place, 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. So now I have 12. So now I have my two partial sums. And our last step is we're going to add this one and this one together. 0 is 0. 6 and 2 is 8, and 1 is just 1. Now let's look at our answers, or at what we were multiplying. Our multiplicand, we didn't have any decimal place values over here. We just have the decimal by itself, so there's nothing behind that decimal, so I'm not counting anything. On our multiplier though, 1.5, that 0.5 right there, there's my decimal. One place value is behind the decimal, so this is 0, this is 1. Add those together, I still just get 1. So in my answer, I'm going to move it 1 place value because there was only one number behind it. In my two numbers up here, only one number. So that means my answer is going to become not 180, but just 18. So 18.0. Okay. Take a breath, write those down, and then let's go ahead and now look at division. Now, division can be a little bit tricky, but if we remember how to do our numbers, writing inside the house, outside the house, following those rules, it's not too difficult. So my first rule, if I go back up to the top, change those fractions to decimals. After I get those rules, I'm going to go ahead and make my new rules. So first rule is make the divisor a whole number by multiplying by the powers of 10. So that's basically saying we're going to move those place values over until that number that's outside the house turns into a whole number. I want to move that decimal all the way. Kind of like how I had this 12, my decimal's all the way out to the side. So I know that this is just a 12. It's not 12 point something. It's just a number all by itself, a whole number. One of my counting numbers. My next step is, well, whatever I do to one side, what I do to outside of my house, I got to do to the inside. So then I'm going to multiply the dividend by that same power. Okay, so whatever I multiply this one by, I'm going to multiply the one inside the house. Move over the same number of place values. And the last part is then I bring my quotient or my decimal directly back to my quotient. So my decimal place will be in the exact same spot that I moved for my dividend. Now, again, lots of vocabulary words we have to remember, recall. So let's look at that example. So our problem we're going to work on is 50 divided by 2.5. So all right, this one's already a fraction. I'm not going to worry about turning it into a decimal. That's what I meant. This one's already a decimal, so I don't have to worry about changing it to a decimal because it is a decimal. So 2.5. My decimal for that 50 is right there. So it's a 50, and then my decimal goes there. If there is no decimal, I always know it's at the very end. So I'm going to rewrite this how we do our division symbols. So our division symbols like that. So the first number goes inside. The second number goes outside. So inside out. I think that's like a movie, right? That's like a Disney movie, Inside Out. So inside and then outside the house. Let's go ahead and move it down. I think I already wrote it down. Don't give away answers. Did I give away any answers? Oh, look at that. I didn't give away any answers. All right. So this one was inside the house, the 50, and the 2.5 is outside the house. My first rule said I'm going to change this 2.5 into a whole number. So I move my decimal over here. So my number on the outside of the house is a 25, right? So I move my decimal over here. So now it's just 25 and the decimal at the end. But whatever I did to the outside, I got to do to the inside. So we had a 50. I move it over one place value. I can't have nothing in here. So that's why I add a 0. So this goes from a 50 to now it's going to become a 500. So that's what I meant by powers of 10, right? I multiplied it by 10, 2.5. If I multiply it by 10, it becomes 25. So just moving it over one place value in this direction is like I'm multiplying by 10. I move this over one place value, so it's like I multiplied by 10. So my new number is 25 on the outside and 500 on the inside. So there's two kinds of way I like to think about this kind of problem. If I have the number 25, I like to think about quarters. So this would be 25 cents. This would be $5. So how many quarters would I need to give me $5? That's one way you guys can go ahead and work that out and remember. Or we can go ahead and do our long division. So if I have 25, can I divide 5 by 25? No. 25 is way too big to divide that by 5. So I'm going to put a 0 there because I can't use anything. But if I go to the next place value, now I have 50. How many 25s do I need to give me 50? 25, 50. Oh, two of them. 2 quarters make 50 cents. So that means if I have 2 quarters, that's 50 cents. That just gives me two, and that's a 0. I bring down the 0, and then there's nothing there. So if I have nothing, I can't divide it by anything, so this is just going to be another 0. And since there's nothing left to divide, I put my decimal at the end. So my answer is going to be 20. Ta-da! And there you go. I had to move my decimal right above it. So remember, my decimal for the 25 was right here. And I had 500. I always remember my decimal is at the end. So right above it goes the decimal. So that's why it's a 20. All right. So there we go. There are our rules. Those are examples when we have 1/2 as a fraction and we turn our decimals to a 0.5. So let's go ahead and now let's move to back to our Nearpod. So let me go ahead and shrink this away and look at our notes. This is what we just went ahead and wrote down. So now let's go ahead and practice some of these problems. Oh, look, I wrote down all the notes conveniently in your Nearpod. The adding and subtracting rules and reminders. And these are the examples we worked out. The multiplying reminders. And here are the examples we worked out. And the last one, oops, that should have said division reminders. So let's just ignore that. It says division in another universe. So our division reminders and our division example. Now, this is a collaborative board. If you were in the class, you'd be able to participate in this, but I don't think our Nearpods are going to let us go ahead and participate on this. So all I wanted you to think about was, what is the first step when I have this problem? -9 times 2 and 1/2. Remember, whenever I have a fraction, my first step is to what? I don't hear anybody. Oh, yeah, because I'm recording by myself. Retain that 1/2 into a decimal. So the rule that we set, or the conversion we have for half, is 0.5. So then we're going to change that into a decimal, and then we'll be able to multiply these two numbers. So that is the steps I would take to solve it. Change it from a fraction to a decimal, multiply, and then since there's only one decimal right there, my answer, I'm going to move it over 1 decimal. And then thinking about by my rules before, that's a positive number, that's a negative number. Since they're different, that also means my number is going to be negative. So quite a few rules that we need to remember, kind of fuel a couple of expectations on how to do these problems. All right, so let's go ahead and now go to the next slide. Yep, so you would type in here. If it lets you, you can type in some of those rules. I don't know if it's going to let you. The Nearpods, when I'm not there, sometimes don't work unless it's live. All right, so now you're going to go ahead and solve this problem. 4 and 1/2 times a -13. And tell me, what does it equal? So we have to pay attention to changing our fraction to a decimal, pay attention to our positive and negative numbers, multiply, and then move over the correct number of place values once we get our product. So let's move now to our next slide where you're going to work it out. Oh no, I skipped working it out. Well, okay. So to solve this problem, we want to convert to solve this problem. I would, ooh, I would first I would convert the 1/2 to a decimal. So that's our first rule all the time. Uh-oh, very bad at clicking on these. So I convert my 1/2 to a decimal, which is 0.50. And then second, I'm going to multiply them and then pay attention to my Nacho Man. Remember the Nacho Man, the triangle, when I had two negatives and a positive? So I want to pay attention to those Nacho Man rules, because on that last problem we had a positive and a negative number. So these are the rules I want to follow. You click done and then you'll submit it. Look at that, 6 out of 6. Big brain. So now let's go ahead and solve that problem. 4 1/2 times a negative 13. All right, so follow all those rules. First, change that fraction into a decimal, and then multiply. And then what you do is you use your Nacho Man. All right, so if you need to pause it, pause it if you need some more time. But if not, let's go ahead and move on in 3, 2, 1. Next slide. All right, so in our class, we're going to go ahead and pause before we start this next lesson on using 1/4 as our operations. So in our next class, we're going to go ahead and start off right here using 1/4 as our next fraction for us to understand. So in today's lesson, we're stopping a little bit early. There will be no exit ticket on this lesson. And so let's go ahead and wait for part 2. And hopefully I get to see you guys in the classroom soon. Bye.